When we left off, we had this. It resembled a Simca. It didn't sound like one, but it made noise. But we had a long way to go if we were going to put this thing on the road. We knew we wanted to retain as much of the Cadillac's wiring and electronics as possible, just so this thing would handle like it was supposed to. And that started with using the original gauge cluster. We found a piece of a 55 Dodge panel wagon that the gauge cluster fit into perfect. Spent a little time with a hammer and dolly, and we got that attached to the original Chatelaine dash. After that, Amy spent a little bit of time on the keyboard doing her magic, and it was time to put a cage in the beast. A cage was almost necessary after we had cut probably 2,000 pounds of caddy and structure out of this thing. So we started with the main hoop and then just started bending bars. I didn't want the cage to stick out and be totally obtrusive, but at the same time I wanted people to notice that we meant business when this thing was going down the road. With the front end of the cage and the dash where we wanted it, we called up Summit, got our measurements done, and they sent us an I Did It steering column. Threw together a little bracket for that last center bar up front, and we got this thing steering on its own. Once we got the down bars in to catch that rear suspension, stiffen up the rear end, all we had left was the seatbelt bar. But we had a lot of patching to do before we were going to be putting in those seats, so it was back to welding and grinding, welding and grinding. Yeah, we could have just welded this original caddy floor pan right to the Simca and it probably would have come out okay. I mean, structurally it would have been fine, but in my head it just didn't look right. We needed both wheel wells to match on the inside, so we spent a little extra time, and it definitely was worth it. At this point, the body was exactly what I had imagined, but it was still a long way from done. So it was time to start filling in the gaps. We had doors to build, a rear tailgate, a rear hatch, the whole front grille had to be designed, and we still had to figure out what we were going to do with that hood. Luckily, our project Simca came with a few extra sets of doors, and originally my thought would be to, 60-40 them, cut a little bit more off of one side and add it to the 60% of the other. But when it came down to it, and the arcs and the grooves and the slight curves that this car has, what we ended up doing was cutting the middle out of one section and then adding it to the two halves of the others. Unbelievably, most of the indentations for the interior and a lot of the bracketry and the parts for the door handles all just seemed to line back up. It was like it was meant to be. The one last big exterior thing that needed to be fabricated was some kind of pan for the back, and then we really wanted to incorporate these cool little bumperettes that the Simca had originally. Now, these weren't going to be structural by any means, and it definitely wasn't going to hold off a bus if you crossed in front of them in the wrong type of traffic. but they looked really nice and they were good and solid. We found these really cool resonators on Summit Racing, and we thought 4 pipes sticking out of the back and the indented license plate would look really aggressive on the back of this Simca. Besides the fact we had a little extra time, being that we were able to use most of the original Cadillac exhaust. We'd gone as far as we could go with the metal and fab on the exterior of this car, and the body work was going to be extensive, so we got started. We got those corners nice and rounded out, got rid of any little dings and dents, smoothed out the few welds, and made sure those lines were straight before we threw primer on this thing. Oh man, I almost forgot to tell you what we decided to do with this hood. So I thought it would be easier if we clamshelled the hood instead of tacking and welding it together and praying that we didn't get a warp in it. So aesthetically, I think it was the right call, but did it save me any time? Hell no. So we of course called up Be Cool for our radiator setup and cooling, gave them the outside dimensions, inlet and outlet locations, and when it showed up she plopped right in place. The original 1960 Simca wagon did come with a chin spoiler on the front, so this one was definitely getting one. We took a lot of the original pieces, built one 8 inches wider, about 3 inches taller. Moving on to the inside, we were finally going to get to those seats. I got that center bar put in place, and I started bending up round bar for our new console. We wanted to get the seats set in so it almost looked like each person in the car had its own separate cockpit. So the center console was going to come out of the center there and wrap all the way around to the outside of the car, completely encasing the seating location. We were able to use the original shifter out of the Cadillac in its original location, and then built an armrest compartment in the back that we actually scavenged out of an 05 Jeep. Our donor Cadillac had very low miles on it, so most of the suspension and work we had to do underneath was just cleaning up and making it look nice. Of course, there was a few upgrades we were going to need, so we called up QA1, got a set of coilovers, and Classic Performance helped us out with a full set of disc brakes. This 1960 Simca actually has the first engineered setup for a coilover suspension for an 06 Cadillac. Thanks, Bill Foley. After weeks of designing, drawing pictures, looking at different samples, me and Amy finally came up with a decision on the front grille. It's very reminiscent to a 57 Chevy, isn't it? So even though the 8 billion feet of wire we'd already gone through to make the motor run was pretty much in place, we decided to call it painless to go with everything we needed to run the rest of the car. Headlights, taillights, turn signals, you know, those few necessary things. So it was finally time to pick a color for this car, and we really wanted it to look like an original Fiat, Simca, you know, British color car. So the car came in two colors when we got it, at least the pieces we got. This really nice Fiat green and this really cool baby blue. Color decided, Amy jumped in and got all the Thermatech put in, sound deadener, kept it nice and quiet and cool in the car, started laying in the carpet. We used MDF to cover up most of the compartments, one behind the seats that housed all the electronics from the Cadillac, and one in the back that used to be the spare tire well that was probably going to be used for coolers and tools. We jumped in, got the final block sanding done on the exterior of the body, got her taped up, and it was finally time to see what this thing would look like in color. We decided to make the door panels as close to stock as possible, but then wrap them and the dash in a really nice black vinyl. With the car painted and rolling, we moved her over to the assembly side. We were finally able to see what those cool upgraded Grody headlights and taillights were going to look like. Of course, you can't have an old wagon or a Cadillac without some wood accents in them somewhere. So we ran some nice skids on the rear tail pan and added some wood accents to the center console in the front of the dash. Cut, buffed, and ready for the dance. Once the hard part's done, we take the car over to Premier Auto, and me and Todd go through and do a nut and bolt check on everything, set the alignment. After that, she's ready to hit the roller. Alright, so this is hopefully the last little shakedown run before she gets packed up and heads out to Vegas. So, let's go play with it for a second, see what she does.
What?
Go.